Good afternoon, it's Shirley with Spirit of Matter. And this is, well, it's no longer a Jupiter day, it's actually a moon night. So this is moon night and moon hour with moon in the 8th house here in Capricorn, which is Saturn ruled, and Saturn in the 10th house. The midheaven is also Saturn ruled, conjuncting Deneb Algadi. So very interesting structural time signature for this episode. And the ascendant is Mercury ruled with in Gemini, 12 degrees Gemini, just separating from Aldebaran, a fixed star with Mercury on Antares in the 7th house in Sagittarius. Ruled by Jupiter in the 12th house in Taurus. We have Mars combust, okay? And I think Ksenia more here. This is not a Mars cazimi. It's basically probably Mars closer to the sun than in a cazimi because Mars is basically burned by the rays of the sun. It's not the Mars cazimi, although it is the birthing of Mars because it conjuncts the sun. It might not have the blessed effect that the Mars cazimi had. Nonetheless, it even though combustion is not something that is desirable in, let's say, talismanic magic, I'm not a pro on that. I'm just sharing information. I have to admit that the whole event, it's too early to say, but today the whole event was supposed to fall on Jerusalem, and there was a terror attack in Jerusalem, but it was something that was planned to be way, 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 way bigger, and it was stopped mid-track, which is interesting and fascinating. So for those of you who say, well, this is a blessed Mars cazimi, this is a blessed conjoining of the Sun and Mars, perhaps you have reasoning to say so, as something tremendously big was avoided in Jerusalem. Okay, so that's for kind of today. And this Mars-Sun conjunction or combustion is trining Neptune by the exact degree right now. So Neptune in the 10th house. And for the topic of this episode. So this episode is about points of interference and what people call timeline shifting. Okay? So this is perhaps for some people will just see it as a more philosophical episode, but I truly intend it as applied praxis of certain interferences that we see ongoing. So first of all, I want to touch on the experience of betrayal, okay, on a mundane level. So both on the case of Maui, very likely in the case of Afghani refugees that are being deported or basically genocided from Pakistan after they spent years there. Refugees in Europe being deported, which is basically multiple genocide. Because they don't really have safe countries to return to. You understand that. So, and the homeless in America being put in concentration camps, or with nobody being able to broadcast it, and so journalists being arrested. Okay, there is a multinational experience by the people. Perhaps with COVID, it has intensified for the places like the Europe, where people cannot grow crops on their lands, not just animals, just everything. And the people are feeling increased betrayal by the governments, organizations, the UN, um, and of course there was the 7th of October in Israel, which was local, which I was personally more close to, because it's just like we didn't know if it was going to be our village. Um, so the personal and mundane experience of betrayal by those you're expected to sacrifice your life to, which is the state. A lot of homeless people in America are veterans or war veterans. People went through torture in Iraq, they came back, they can't sustain a job anymore. And if you don't have a very strong support system of family, which is difficult because the marriages and the families tend to break under the situations, then they basically are in the street. And the political culture, now we almost get to the points of interference here already. The political culture in the United States, in many cases, is, well, if you are in the street, you must have made some choices that were not good, and therefore you are in the situation. So let's see, how do you make better choices in life next, before we give you help, before we give you house. Okay, or if we give you a house, we give you house for a couple of months where you can correct yourself, which is antithetical to the trauma of homelessness and the multiple traumas that are involving this situation. So this is one example. In Israeli army service is even mandatory. It doesn't mean that they recruit everyone, okay? I was not recruited to the army, but it is an army culture, and you're expected, if you're recruited um, to be combatant, you're expected to sacrifice your life for the country. There is no question. Nobody asks you. There is hardly anything you can do to get away. And a lot of people commit suicide in the army, even still. So when something happens, or if you talk about taxation in the Netherlands, when you're working and making good money, then you're paying 52% taxes. Okay, in some countries like Switzerland, not Switzerland, no, yeah. I did a mistake. Sweden, then you might be paying even more taxes. And then you're expecting that if, God forbid, you have a crisis, that you will be assisted, okay? And unless you're taking a prescribed medication or addicted to drugs, you basically have no representation and no solutions. Even if, and of course, if you are in these situations, it's very likely that you will be betrayed and abandoned as well, okay? Also in Israel is the same. So when we, the people, are on a mundane level in each country required to make some sort of, whether it's a sacrifice, if it's serving in the army or mandatory army, it can be like extreme, but it can also be paying taxes. It can also be expecting to be a patriot, and certain world events happen, or even personal crises happen, and we feel that we're abandoned, we're left to our own devices. And sometimes that's even in the good case, because you have the gaslighting of help that is actually hurting you on purpose. Um, so and the experience of people being sold to corporations, children being kidnapped worldwide, and all of these things that can no longer be ignored on a global level. So some of these touch at what we call the sedna story, which is basically a story of betrayal. Okay, you see that the ruler of the hour and the night here is moon in the 8th house, which can also have to do with betrayals. Um, Betrayal, whether it's by the healthcare system, by social welfare, and by the network of support. That when you make such big sacrifices for the country, you expect, yes, that you're like, yeah, you don't ask what the country can do for you, you ask what you can do for the country, but you definitely don't expect that if you are in a crisis situation, you will be betrayed, attacked, assaulted, left to your own devices in the good case sometimes, and basically um, go through this tremendous abandonment from and betrayal from the country. Okay, so on a global level, many people are beginning to experience that. And some people kind of wise up from certain realizations that or certain perceptions, whether it's the perception that the homeless person in the street is such because they made bad choices in life, or that people who have addiction are kind of like the weaklings of society. But absolutely not. There's just the people who take all the shit that nobody takes until they can't anymore. And then when they're betrayed, they really don't have a way to cope with that. And victims of corruption, or people that are having what it looks like, oh, they're the perpetual victim, and kind of understand that there's more like the Aries case, okay, the victim of systematic corruption. And people are exposed to more and more things, okay, when you have a masses of refugees whose children are being taken away from them by the very forces that are supposed to help them, then you understand that perhaps the taking of children from their parents in many instances was not only unjust, but downright criminal, and it was not in favor of the child. Whereas there are other cases where it's the children that ask for shelter and they're forcefully put in oppressive situations. And so it becomes kind of viral, kind of pandemic of corruption and hurt. Everybody is exposed to what used to be things that marginalized groups of society were exposed to. Okay, so in this betrayal experience, there is a relation through, or ability to relate and connect through more and more people understanding the experience of betrayal on a societal level. Okay, as we get to sedna in Gemini, right now sedna is ingress to the 29 degrees of Taurus, where she has been kind of like up until June this year. And she will re-ingress into Gemini, okay? And so people go over various degrees of experiences of betrayal, the comparison between victim blaming in case of sexual harassment and victim blaming people for their regimes, okay, worldwide, or for not knowing or for not seeing. And the tensions that arise to this. So then the question is, with the impending kind of like Agenda 2030, industrialized cities and 15-minute cities, and lack of rights. Okay, what the Economical Forum desires is basically for people to not have the ability to decide on themselves, and to have kind of like a global regime, and to purchases to be monitored with social credit score, so people will not have access to money. And so basically enslaving people, taking them away from a connection to the things that balance the immune system, like a walk in nature. When I say walk in nature, I don't mean Heidi the mountain girl, okay? People who are isolated in a forest also suffer isolation, okay? But I definitely do mean that if you take a walk in nature, in a safe place, if you step bare feet on the soil, it does help to reduce. If the soil is fertile, things are growing it. If you grow some of your own crops, not even to feed yourself, to self-sustain, because homesteaders are collapsing as well. Many people try to do the homesteading thing and are like, this is too much. Okay, so again, this is not about taking us to a prehistoric time. It's just the understanding that we do need a connection with nature to heal, and we do need to step, on fertile soil. We do need to be a part of growth. We do need to grow plants or grow something that's helpful for most of humanity, or grow pets. Okay, I recently have kittens that were born around the war, basically the regional war here, because the actual war is pretty much with Ukraine, probably, or even COVID. So when we talk about Agenda 2030, we're talking about deprivation of every human right. Okay, your ability to participate in the economy, okay, your ability to step in nature if you're in 50-minute cities, and you need a social credit score to buy bread in the store. This is already happening in segments of the world, like in China. So it's very easy to get excluded from those societies, and you don't really have representation because people deciding globally for what everybody can do. And it seems like you will own nothing and be happy. Yeah, so we get that this is not in favor of autonomy. It is not in favor of anything that represents humanity or humans. Okay, and now the question is, what are the points of interferences that we have as a society? Okay, so, and here is a very interesting thing, because when there is a terrible disaster, a Holocaust happening, people are immediately turning to the gays, the Jews, the Muslims, okay? And they're turning to all kinds of deprivation of human rights, which is not connected with ancient shamanic knowledge and wisdom that comes from all four winds. Okay? There's the understanding and connection between the elements, the forces of nature, and the things that happen in the world. Okay? So one thing is to understand these elements, and a very simple understanding. If children are the passageway, if children don't have a childhood, then people can be deprived of joy in their country. Okay, it doesn't even need an explanation. What is the facets of children? Children, they change their moods quite easily. It can be disrupted quite easily. So think about the changing of the weather. I talked about Mercury in Sagittarius yesterday. I talked about Mercury as the ruler of Gemini, which is basically children. Okay? And a child can cry, you divert their attention, you make them laugh, and they're laughing. They forget all about it. And child also tries things and tries again and is playful. And he also begin to tell the truth. They tell the truth about everything. And this is why Mercury, which is the ruler of Gemini, is also ruling lies, because as a child learns that there's repercussions to telling the truth. Okay, it is a child can walk up to a Jewish person like me, tell me, "Yeah, your nose is so big. Why is it?" I was born like this, okay? But if a person has kind of insecurities about themselves, then children are going to naively poke at this. It's like, "Hey, your ears are so big." And you've been kind of trying to hide and wear like big earrings or stuff like that. Or you're just going to they're going to pay attention to things, okay? But they're also purify the space. I have kittens, and they have been busy playing. They've been going in all four corners of every room, and I'm like, this is just like purifying the house. It's better than sage, okay? There's a kitten playing in the room, kind of clarifying, cleansing the energy. So even though I'm so exhausted and I don't have the power to clean up the way I would want to, perhaps for the house to be clean. So there's these kittens that are running through the four corners of the house, constantly creating motion within where could be stagnant energy. And I'm like, my God, this is a blessing. And it's already diverting the attention even of me as the adult. Is have such cute faces, always so curious, and they're just fantastic. Okay, and so when children get to have a childhood, then we get this joie de vivre. We get this diverting, we get the maintaining of our nervous system, of our neural connections, ability to create new connections, to be curious, to have a blessed destruction. Not destruction is destroying things, but destruction is diverting the attention to something else, okay, if we're pissed or something like that. And this is a great quality of the Gemini Mercury. Okay, I've also been working with the Gemini Mercury Talisman by Experience Sundry, which I really like. And it has this quality of playfulness, diverting the attention. It also triggers my, I have Chiron in Gemini, so my communication issues are kind of coming to a front. I can communicate like a child, or suddenly not be able to receive communication. It's like all these things. But all in all, a very blessed effect. And so children is a point which for children to have a childhood. Okay, even setting the intention and understanding cognitively that this needs to be, and the children should have a childhood, uh, and for us to not shorten this childhood, or not hurt this childhood, okay, whether it's through child labor, atrocities or whatnot, and as well as for radical acceptance. When we have radical acceptance, then children can speak to us more blatantly, and we're not offended by it. Okay, we're not triggered by it in as much. So there's the things that we do to work on ourselves. Something can be very, terrifying depending on what you have there. So this is one element. So it's the changing of the seasons. It's also changing from, if you're in of states, it's the doorway. Okay, so although the entrance to the world and the exit from the world. Okay, Mercury is the psychopomp. And so a point of interference when we tend to children, when we honor Mercury, or we honor Gemini, is basically the blessed distractions from something that it could go the wrong. So you get a blessed destruction. You're not being so destructive. So that is a wonderful thing to have. And this also eases the passage into the world and out of the world. Okay, so we talk about death, or the fears around death, or the process of dying. Okay, here honoring children can give us easier births. Okay, there's a component in easier birth and a component in easier death. So but also changing from a state, okay, coming from, let's say, if a nation or people are oppressed, then liberation from oppression, or occupation, or colonialism, into autonomy, independence. So one of the things is honoring children, or which is why I believe that the strategy of, let's say, using children in the sense of them being a part of the guerrilla, or them being kind of like human shields, is something that is kind of it's undermining the intent to liberate and to gain autonomy, because if the child is hurt, we're undermining our ability to transition from, let's say, occupation to autonomy and liberation. Okay, so that is one point of interference. Okay, to be kinder to children, to tend to these things. And also when you talk about fertility, we already begin to delve into Moon Venus land, but just around children. Okay, when the world is ready for children to grow and to have a childhood, then we already have, it's kind of like an energy form of making the space for whether missing children to return, kidnapped children to return worldwide, for unborn children to be born. Okay, and so if children can have a childhood, then this is an inviting place for children. Okay, so conception already becomes easier, and birth is becoming easier, and the fertility rises. Okay, if children have a childhood, the fertility rises. Think about the grown person has to tend to their inner child. Okay, it's kind of like, if I am still a child and I have my inner child needs, I need to have a sufficient level of childhood before I give birth to children, or as long as it's within my control or my choice. I need to have a childhood before I am a parent, before I give birth to children or grow children, so that when the children come, I am ready. I have this readiness to be there for them and look at the world from another point of view, through the assistance of their curiosity, because enjoying them grow rather than thinking about how deprived I am from being a child or from having a childhood. Okay, so also the passage from an adult to a parent is also a passage, transition phase. Okay? And so this is one point of interference that we have. And if we think about the 2030 agenda happening in a cycle of eclipses in the axis of Gemini and Sagittarius, okay, but the last time where the eclipses were there was COVID. And so now we get more clues as to our points of interferences. Okay, now we get more clues. How many injections do infants receive since the 70s? Okay, I don't think there is enough zeros in the percentages of rising of those injections. So this is a question. Okay, we don't want to bring back ailments that we have managed to abolish, but also, where do these ailments that we managed to abolish started from? Okay, are they natural? Are they lab raised? Okay, and those are things. Returning again to Richard Feynman, who actually has his own Rao and Ketu on the Sagittarius Gemini axis, and he was in Caltech. He was eating with the folks from like many departments, and he met the people. He said there are great people who come up with cures to ailments we never thought we can heal. And he said at the same time that teams of the greatest minds working on creating ailments that nobody will be able to cure. Okay, that was said probably in the 70s, or the 60s, or the 70s, and he died in 80. He died in 88. Yeah, died in 88, I believe, 86, from cancer. So this is the first testimonial of a person who was speaking with the people, okay, back in the 60s, back in the 70s. A person who took part in Manhattan Project when he was young. So imagine your Saturn returns, Hiroshima and Nagasaki being dropped, and you help developing them. So that is the axis, the nodal axis that we had in COVID. And this is also the nodal axis, the nodal reversal that we're going to have in 2030. Okay. And so we understand the role of viruses and poisons and medicine and poison, and the role that these play in this nodal axis along the years. Okay, so, and thus we see another point of interference. If we tend to the well-being of children, we understand that we don't want to have a crazy poisoning going on there without children being protected from it. But we also don't want to get into this corrupted situation where your child has to receive like, I don't know, 30 shots of something before they turn 10 or so. And I'm exaggerating. It's kind of like 70 before they turn 3 or something. But this is hilarious when all of these shots are also harming the body, and all of these poisons are man-made. A lot of these poisons are man-made. We have a balance between good hygiene and playing in nature. So if people have a yard and have a forest or just a place where the children can play safely, and then these children come to the house and they shower, so we have a little bit of a hygiene going on there, but we also have exposure to nature. If nothing is being poisoned, if these children do get to travel abroad, which is very important, you should not forget worldwide traveling. There are green jets. There are ways to do this. It's absolutely not impossible. It's very important because when we travel, first of all, we're not going to need to have exile in order to create this expansion. And we're not going to need to have a colonialism in order to grow and learn the world. Okay, we're not going to need the crisis to do that. And when we travel, then let's say for your first time in India, and you have never been in India and you've never ate food that was cooked by Indians, then you might get a food poisoning, while in fact there's nothing poisonous there for you. You're just not used to that bacteria. Okay, now we get how there is the child that's being exposed to the outside, so they don't get all these allergies. In Finland, they made this experiment and they began to put children in nature again, even in the kindergarten, even when it's snowy, because they would not have all these allergies and all these crazy ailments that the children have, because they were exposed to the environment, to the biodiversity. Okay, so you have the combination of biodiversity and of washing up, cleaning up, then you are a healthy human being. And then when you grow a bit older, you can also travel abroad. And so if you do this when you're a child, then you will become a very multinational, healthy person, because you're exposed to biodiversity. And there's another point of interference to at least understand that we need both the local exposure to nature, okay, and the big house. We do need the big house for the condition, the environment, for everybody to have their space and have the spacious space. And there is enough place on Earth. Okay, so there's another point of interference to just understand this, to just know it, and to just remove the beliefs or blockages we have in our consciousness to achieving that. Because if you grew up, let's say if you grew up in Netherlands, okay, the Netherlands is a fairly beautiful country, considered high quality of life, one of the most wanted passports. Yeah, but people in Netherlands, they do live in very small houses. And so there is a pandemic of stress, and where people are used to this culture where you can't ask for too much for yourself. You don't think that um, it's okay to want a bigger house, even though that could contribute to the well-being of your marriage and to the well-being of the relationship with your children. Okay, so we need a sense of community. We also need a sense of a place to retreat. Here, people say it's territorial, but it's actually space. It's actually air. It is a fresh air. Okay? Just understanding these things are points of interferences. Okay, how do I improve upon these things in my own life? There are people who are doing feng shui and are even great channels on YouTube who are doing feng shui to people living in the tiniest of houses. Say, okay, how can I improve upon the order of things so that I get better energy and better feel in my home? And now when you know what things need to be like, then you can tend to it, even in the slightest, the tiniest of steps, and you can improve upon your situation. You can already create a certain movement towards that which is desired, which nourishes the seed of alternatives. There is the birthing of desire. Okay, just like people like even like Abraham Hicks would talk about. I'm not agreeing with everything that they said. Of course, rape is not the momentum of desire, right? But definitely is the seed of desire and the birthing of desire and the watering and the nourishing of desire that it grows and grows and grows, and then you know, have the birthing of something that manifests in your world, because it already is. If you want something, it already is. Or if you want to take it from the Disney point of view, if you can dream it, you can do it, and stuff like that. So and when you are meeting your desires with readiness, then where you're making the head space for things to alter, for things to change, for more alternatives to come into your world. Okay, so these are more points of interferences. And we talked about fertility. So I want to say something, because the many women, probably also men, where before they had a child, they were in such and such relationship. Then they had a child. Okay, and I'm one of these children. And to these parents. And when they had a child, they're like, I don't want my child to grow in a house where there is fighting, where there is arguing, where there is this, where there is that. And then they made the brave step, by whether it's divorce or walking out, or for some people, it's even understanding that they need an even bigger house than they thought they needed, or to need every person to have a space to retreat to themselves. But with the child came the understanding. Okay, so after we talked about the children, honoring children, fertility, and even the understanding is, hey, what does my child needs, my unborn child needs to have in this world? What do the kidnapped children need to grow in this world? Okay, and tending to that, it makes a space for something to grow, for life to grow. Okay. It can even be simple. It can even be with pets. When I was living in my previous apartment, I was a dog sitter for a while, and then a couple of people told me, like, you need a cat or something. You need to raise a cat or something. And I'm like, I don't think I can support it financially. This is too much of a small space for a cat. And the first thing that happened when I moved in, there was a cat in the place that she was entering the place. She was a street cat. And after the eclipse, I had this mother that gave birth to the kittens. There was a war. But before that, I have the cat that is on my lap right now. And it just entered my home. We were not even looking for food or anything. It was in the night. And they started to climb on my bed and they just purred and slept next to me. Okay. So the cat found its way to me, literally. Okay. And the reason I'm telling this story is because in my previous home, it was a one-room apartment, and my thought, because I'm half Dutch, was like, well, in Netherlands, I wouldn't have had a bigger place. So I was like, okay, this is a small place, it's one-room apartment, but I have my kitchen, I have my shower, I have my bath. What do I need more? It's kind of like the Dutch blocks that, even though I grew up in Israel, were evident. It was like, oh, well, what do I need more than that? But there was no place for the kitten. And then the first thing that happened when I moved out was having a kitten. And kind of like now it's a fact. Now there is a kitten in the house. Okay. Now it's a fact. So when we are making the space for something to happen, the solutions begin to arrive at the time and pace and with our readiness. So that is yet another point of interference. Okay. And when we talk about this Gemini Sagittarius axis, if each of us can go to COVID land, where we had the nodes on Sagittarius and Gemini, and begin to think, what were we doing? What was going through there? Because we're going to have another meeting of that in 2030. And there are points of interference here. Okay? There are things to prepare for this. So if people are talking about 15-minute cities, one of the things is to begin to envision the cities that we do want, or the villages or the way of life that we do want. Okay, going for what we do want. Another thing is, we talk about is honor children, honor childhood, and tending to the problems of children. So to facilitate this, this fertility. Yes, sweetheart. So another thing is the birthing process. Okay, so if we talk about the birthing of something, we want to birth an idea, it's a birth. So tending to labor, tending to birth. The rights of people who give birth, the accessibility to respectful birthing process. The time to process things. Okay. The understanding that there is rest, and not rest is involved in labor. I was watching a beautiful story about two Norwegian women that are married. One of them gave birth, and so the process of birth giving is very lengthy to many. And even though it was a home birth and everything was pretty fine, it was still a process. A couple of hours, and she sits and she is in the water, like arranged water pool, and then she stands, and then she's like, oh, and she's told by the doula, kind of like, you can go back to sleep. She's like, how can I sleep? Okay. And all of these things, and the time where she suddenly needed everybody to leave her alone, or to grab the boobs of her partner, basically for oxytocin release. And so you see that this is a process. And when we get more understanding about this process of birthing and the process of connection, boundary setting, even if you think about conception, about sex, okay, then there is the courting and the boundary setting and the willing consent and the now I need you to leave me, now I need you to be with me, and there's a process to it that requires flexibility and required groundedness. Okay, you need to be present. Okay, you need to have earth element, fertile soil, you have earth and water, a combination of the earth and water that creates a flexibility for birthing to come through. Now we get what is earth and water. It's the moon and Venus. Okay, when the moon exalts in Taurus, which is ruled by Venus, the moon is water element. So think about our waters. Another earth element is Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. You think about fluoride. It's affecting our teeth, our bones, but also our nervous system. We have fluoride clear water. This is how we keep the water across the generation. Caregivers in the caregivers have enough soil, enough ground to birth with ease. If we grew up on African tell us that women should be birthing with pain and they're punished and so it's like, what does it do to the birthing process? There's another point of the pain. How can people expect to have fertile soil if we don't honor women, honor mothers, honor caregiving, honor children? If a mother is released from the child, she needs to have a lot of fertile soil. This is easier to let go. And for the child to have freedom. If she is oppressed, she will be controlling. Boy is oppressed. He's suffocated. He wants his freedom. It doesn't mean he doesn't want connection. And so it can tend to assert itself in ways that are overly penetrative, which is the paradox of violation of boundaries, whether it's sexually or emotionally or psychologically or financially. It tries to tend to control. You can't, because it didn't have the soil. His mother didn't have the soil. He didn't have the soil. And now, consequently, when he wants to assert a boundary, he uses instead of assertion. There's enough land. We honor children, we honor women. When mothers are assisted and given time to heal proper, and when the step where people are respected and birth is easy, natural and easy. The mother is respected. And when we get that, we also understand that, if the mother's perspective, it's okay to feel the emotions are validated, then if it's a boy, it will grow to validate its own emotions, to have time to process, to have the birthing process healthy inside him. So when I say his partner gives birth, or when it comes to conceive, he can contain the back and forth, the are you willing consent proof. Okay, and then these are you willing consent proof, kind of like I want you, I don't want you, I'm here, I'm there, I'm this, I'm that. They become less erratic, not erotic, and the attachment becomes safe. So you're both able to go through this, and you don't have to go through this all that much, because it's less and less an issue of like, are you willing consent? But nobody even conceives that you're not. And you have self-trust because you have fertile soil. And you have fertile soil. How you break through, you tend to that. You just understand that there's like, hey, there is the desired. And now things are going to begin to fall into place. Instead of falling apart, the old world is falling apart, but to fall into place for you. More and more points of interference are going to arise. That creates motion, movement within the stagnation that we've had. And then we have the element of listening, validating, being able to be receptive, valuing just our women, our mothers, our children, our men, for what they have. Their input, their competence, their care, and valuing the two-spiritness or the gender queerness that exists in the world. Here, people are going through either being a man and a woman, and are able to heal society by having these experiences merged within them in a way that is perhaps more accentuated on a kind of like a gradient level than others. Other people who are genderless or genderqueer, to give place to that which is non-binary, because we have this non-binariness within us to a certain degree, without having to depend that on either choosing one or the other, pick a side, you're a man, you're a woman, or deciding what is this gender reveal party? What is not sex reveal party? The boy or as well. Then it put it into the misogyny, the terror. And there are people who need, let's say, gender affirming processes for these people to be informed of what it is. So this again pertains to medicine. We're being put, since the COVID, we're being put in a situation of pick a side, this or that. You either against all types of vaccines and maybe even medicine altogether, or you are going to inject yourself with the 20,000 boosters and whatnot because you care about society. Okay? So we're going to have a meeting with these things. Where in the background will continue to be, especially when the World Health Organization receives a political mandate to rule something. You either have, oh, all pharmaceuticals are corrupt, or everything that I'm given is in my favor, and if somebody tells me that the crazy side effects I've been having are not from the pills, then they're probably right. Or else I'm being categorized as a person who is anti-scientific. And so when there is actual benefic medicine, like if people were terminally ill in cancer and you got a pill, not a chemo, not torture, a pill that put them in remission, gave an improvement of the stage in cancer, and then funding stopped suddenly and they returned to their death. We need to know about it. There is such thing as a medical field. That we don't see it because of the corruption doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So with the Rahu in Gemini, we were with what people call the floating of information, a lot of noises and a lot of omens as well. It was difficult to tell which is noise and which is an omen. What people call the fake, the fake information. So it became legitimate in society to tag fake information and remove it, which seems legit. If somebody tells you, hey, this this is dangerous for you and this is not dangerous for you. Like, oh, this is fake information and it's life-saving, so you should know about this. Okay. And all this trickery around information. So we're going to have a nodal reversal of that in 2030. Okay, what's when you cannot spread information, when because it's going to be flagged as misinformation, even when it's absolutely valid and it's life risking for people to not be exposed to this information. And so that's another point of interference, is where do we think in black and white? To just be aware of it. This is a place where I'm not allowing discourse, or this is a place where I'm currently not ready to see intricacy. Okay, when I was Me Too veteran, I was not able to participate in a situation where men got falsely accused of sexual harassment. Okay, I was not able to. The need for validation preceded anything else. It was a life or death thing. If I would not be around the places and people who could give that validation, I would feel betrayed, so much so that I was lose the shade of humanity that I had. So to be a better person, I knew that I had to seclude myself in a certain sense. Okay? And different people have it with different things. Okay, so, and it's good to know which discourse I'm not able to participate in right now. There are those things that I'm not able to challenge right now because I need them for me. Okay, that being said, there's a difference between keeping your circles in a place where you can participate in them and having a freedom of discourse or freedom of speech. Okay. For some people, they lost somebody due to medical negligence. They can't talk to you about the importance of getting your checkup with a doctor. They don't want to hear about it. Many people, by 2030, it's going to be a lot of people. For some other people, they could have got a reading with an astrologer, or they could have got an energy healing that created a lot of problems for them. Or somebody said somebody got very hurt or even betrayed. You don't want to hear about these sham healers, these astrologers. They want to cut all of that tree out. It's like all of them are sham. I have a friend like this. And she's tried to bug me about the fact that I'm doing astrology. I'm like, for me, this keeps my sanity. This is a centering praxis for me. Yeah. She's like, I can't hear about this self, what did you say, kind of like self-tailored thingy and so on and so forth. She's had enough of it. She's very likely to have a very good reason. She could have got a reading with someone who was not compatible with giving her a reading. And it's just that. Do I check the synastry of me and the client every time I give a reading? No. That in its, and even if I did, I could still have, kind of like a mishap. But then there's a difference between that and having, reports of deaths as a result of taking certain medications that are being purposefully falling out instead of addressing the issue. That happened. Let's take accountability. Let's inform people. It's kind of like, of course, sometimes shit goes down when it's $1 billion on an elevator. And that is, paraphrase on Beyonce and Jay-Z, that is the pharmaceutical, because that's everybody's 401k. That's people's pension on the line. Which is another point of interference, our economy. Can we talk about the fact that every 20, 30 years or so, there's going to be some economical crisis, whether it's the stars or the invisible hand of the families that we don't hear about, and everybody said they're Jews, but 70% of the oil is not owned by Jews. Without neglecting the fact that, yes, there can be certain wealthy families of Jewish descent, that your common, I don't know, Avram and Yosef are not getting any of that. Well, they could be on the street, abandoned and stranded, and none of these Rothschilds, these Rockefellers, is going to do something about it. Okay, so there really is no rationale in marking the doors of people in the Star of David, or I don't know, in Islamophobic or whatnot. It's just like it's not really reasonable. And that's what people call discernment. Okay, we want to solve the problem very urgently, but then we're kind of like, we're trying to put a mark on who is who, and this marking is becoming very blended, especially with deepfake, with AI. In the October horror, October Holocaust, yeah, I won't say these dark jokes. So in the October Holocaust, where basically everybody will remember the picture of the Palestinian kid with 6 fingers. And then you have an AI image of this Palestinian kid with 6 fingers with blood on his hands. And it's kind of like, that the picture is AI. You also know that children are being killed. Or people are being kidnapped or missing, and are being told that the family's being told that they're dead. Are they dead? You can't see a body. It's very What's the Lord of the Hour? I felt it's getting Saturn. Is it kind of it's Jupiter? No, it's Jupiter is in 4 minutes. He just went from the moon to kind of like this, and Saturn in Pisces kind of thingy. So it's kind of like, this is just really. This is also being aware of the doom and gloom, and not being afraid to speak about it. Okay, if we had the love and light kind of thing, like, if you say this, then you manifest this, then you make it grow, and it's like, well, you do need. Sometimes you say this, it's like a balloon where you poke a hole in it, and it kind of like all the air comes out because you've exposed this. So oh, that was something hidden, Pluto, that Saturn ruled now, and you have exposed that. Oh, so now it's not a secret anymore. So now it's not a surprise anymore. So now it's not something that's undercover anymore. So now people are talking about it. So people are aware of that. And so we can't keep it under the radar anymore. Okay. Name it to tame it. It's this famous Dan Siegel. I think it was Dan Siegel. Yeah. It's talking about naming an emotion to tame. It's also naming something that's that of which is vague, foggy, invisible. You give it a name, you talk about it, you bring it in the light, now you tame it. Talking about the energy attacks or psychic attacks of people as a part of the ritual sacrifice that happened probably also in places like Maui, probably also in Gaza, definitely in Israel, very likely in Ukraine and in Russia. Who knows if Afghanistan and so on and so forth. Okay? Exposing, talking about this, not to grow this, but to shed light. So it's no longer in the darkness. And growing what we do want. So growing awareness with the moon and decreasing the phenomena with the growing awareness with the moon increasing and decreasing the phenomena with the moon increasing. It's like full moon, something's fault, and you let it go. Placing what we do want with the moon growing and dissolving obstacles with the moon decreasing. These are ways, these are points of interference. That yield actions, whether it's by speech, whether it's by looking at things differently. Beginning to create a connection between seemingly unrelated conflicts and observing. Okay? Just so you know, two cases. One is Israeli society before 7th of October. So before 7th of October, that are very likely meeting labor conditions of children. And again, this is not a blame on China. This is a situation where China has to be of competition to the entire world, and so reduce and enslave people to win this competition, to feed the people of China. Okay, so this is not about, oh, China is a terrible, evil. Da, 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 da. No, this is a situation that happens, and we need to see what are the points of interferences. People who are Chinese laborers do get fed and very well and work in good conditions. One of them is to pay them well. So if American comfort is made in China, if Volvo is made by Gilly and it's being outsourced to Ukraine, okay, to create batteries, then we can get cheaper cars. But it's important for that not to be at the price of children and people in horrid working conditions. And America has a lot to do with that. It's not just China. It's okay to allocate, to export the production, and it's absolutely okay to take advantage of market gaps or something like that. Uh, what is not okay is to create those market gaps in such a way where people cannot live good in their home countries. And then the people who make it, even the iPhone that I'm talking about, let alone the bus. This actually happened. I literally saw a bus driver, a man, um, uh, stand happen in Israel. And there is the fact that the are insufficient for the people who make these conditions. And it's not all evil China. It's, hey, there are companies who allocate things to China and make able to compete with the global economy to feed its people, sacrifice more and more and more and more and more. It doesn't contribute to the entire American companies. America has a lot to do. So back to the case with Israel, we have oppression of women, oppression of LGBT, more and more happening. Trafficking of soldiers. And I know the lawyer that took the so we ordered chaos. Of course, this was planned for, but it's it was planned to make such a terror attack in Jerusalem that was probably going to shake up the whole world. There was a shooting, and they just stopped the people, and they saw the ammunition that they carried, and they were like, "Shit, that could blow up the entire Jerusalem." Okay, so it was planned. But there are points of interferences where even if something is planned and orchestrated for many years, the conduct would not happen. So the women watchers, first of all, they were all women, which is very fascinating, that they were watching the border for weeks and weeks. They were reporting abnormal activity, and they were not listened to. Okay, and so there were so many points of interference. Like, first of all, why are there only women there? Secondly, why wasn't anybody listening to them? What they had to say for weeks and weeks and weeks. Okay, and so if there is a culture where a woman cannot go on the bus and what you have to say doesn't matter, and it's just not, her being sexual is not okay. then this is a culture that it's a certain gap where it eventually loses land. It's being invaded. Okay, even if let's say Hamas is killed, the war is over, blah blah blah. Okay, the entire region for these cities is people are not going to go back to living there, and the entire region for Gaza, people are not going to go back to living there for many decades. We practically lost land on the 6th of October. As we invaded Gaza, we made it even more congruent that we lost land. Okay, when this land is kind of like a military area, it's not a land where people, and it was 70% of our agriculture. So, and look at this, agriculture, fertile soil. And also we had foreign employees there. Why did we have foreign employees? Because not unlike China, the Israel agriculture would provide for the world for export. And so to be competitive, we had to have a certain quota that was no longer achievable by local Israelis. So we had to hire the people that can do it, hire the people that can do it. They're from the Philippines, from Thailand. These are the people that can do it. They work like crazy. Okay, some of them were murdered and kidnapped. We have kidnapped people. And so when they left, they fled, they were asking for volunteers. And people were like, why are you like, they were not volunteers. Why are you volunteering us? And some of the people, even when you do go as a volunteer, you can't do what the Philippine can do. You can't do what the Thai person can do. You're not born into this. You can wake up in the morning. Yes. Again, my mother used to be a volunteer in one of these. I think it was after, I don't remember exactly, one of the wars probably in the north. Here you would wake up at 4 a.m. and then by 7, 8 you would have to stop. Yes, so now I see people that are waking up at 7:30 a.m. Because you can't tell in Israel if you wake up at 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. they're going to kill you. Okay, so what is being created is a situation where employees are being more and more exploited, even to the point that they're having in danger of being kidnapped and killed and being in a war zone just to make money, because we have to sustain a global economy and the export of goods. And this is 70% of our agriculture, it's also 70% of our food. And then it was like, why do we import tomatoes from Turkey and not sell Israeli products? And I'm like, most people can't afford an Israeli product in Israel. If they go to the supermarket and they can get like a couple of tomatoes and a couple of cucumbers, they're like, oh my God, I managed to get vegetables in Israel, which is insane. There used to be my complaint about Europe, because in Europe you would like 3 peppers sold in kind of like they're wrapped and they're sold as like 3 peppers, and I was like, the heck, who buys 3? Buy 3 kilos maybe. And in the Israeli salad, you need to give up the Israeli salad, and it began to be more and more radically outrageous. So again, we mistreated women more and more. We became less fertile. Agriculture became less fertile. It became an international problem. Then people were losing land. It's not because Israelis are too good for that, or not. because it's inhumane to require this. Because even if I wake up at 4:30 in the morning and I go grab me some oranges, and I go, pick up oranges and stuff like that. And there is laying time, there is that by 80, we're done. By 8 a.m., we're done. And it's good and it's fine. We have produce for our international market, and we are happy and we're jolly. Okay, a lot of the volunteers were raped even back then, and I know this from men. So the thing is that the conditions for work are now not anywhere near that. And so exploitative that only people that are like, either my family is going to die or I managed to do this work. And this is a big problem. So we mistreated our women, we mistreated our LGBTQ, we mistreated our employees, and then we got invaded. Okay. Another example is Bedouin society in Israel, Arab Israeli Bedouin society. It's just Arab Israeli, because there's a lot of people. A lot of them would murder the wife and sometimes the child, because the child would not want to be wed with a certain person, or she was suffering with a certain person. It's practically the sedna story landed here globally. So these girls would be murdered. Also was happening within Israel society, certain segments of Israeli society that is not Arab. Okay, and so Arab Israelis was very prevalent and still is, unfortunately. We had a student when I was studying linguistics. Only recently I found out, because I didn't know her. And a friend of mine told me, well, I know this because I had a friend that her daddy locked her up in the closet so that she will agree to wed someone who was 15 years older than her. Okay, she was young. And so they would be murdered and buried in the sand. Now, this, where I live, where this desert or the Negev region, it was not always sand. Actually, this I learned from a bus driver. We see both in places like Beersheba and in other regions, we see some segments of sugar canes. And this bus driver told me, 100 years ago, my grandfather told me that the plantation, the crops, they were so high that you couldn't see the back of the camel. You think about camel in deserts, it's nothing to do with that. And I did see these sugar canes. I volunteered for a hostel. I was seeing these sugar canes that they were talking about. My grandfather used to sell sugar canes in central Israel, in Ramat Gan, vegetable and fruit shop. And I also saw something that shocked me was many eucalyptus trees, and I live 500 meters above sea level. And eucalyptus trees are known to be they were planted to dry swamps. And I'm, the heck with that. This place was a swamp. It's a desert. Now it's beginning to be a bit greener. If we don't ruin it. So, and there are countries where you had the dunes of sand, and I don't remember which Arab country is it, but you had dunes of sand, and this country buys sand from other countries. You said, why would you buy sand when all you have in your country is dunes of sand? Well, the answer was that this sand that they had was so dry that you couldn't even build a mud house with it. You can imagine the situation of women and thereby children in this Arab country. So, what about air quality, or the air quality, or fires that are breaking? Well, this is men, what people call the masculine. If you oppress a child and that child grows to, let's say, cisgender man, then this is a man that doesn't have self-trust. What happens to a man that doesn't have self-trust, doesn't have clarity? Think about the clarity of the air. There's the clarity of the water. When a woman doesn't have self-trust, there's the clarity of the water and there's the clarity of the air. Okay. There is a problem with the drive, the passion and the drive. It's either too aggressive or can't get itself to ignite, and that's fire. And we have artificial fires. We're not listening to our men. They don't have a place that they can retreat to. They feel either suffocated, invalidated, and they no longer have boundaries, they no longer have self-trust. They can't disobey legal order. Now you say this is orchestrated, this is okay. Now we understand that, and we understand that a man who grows invalidated and mistreated and abused even as a child and doesn't have a place to retreat to, and doesn't have its own autonomy, okay, on a familial level, we say that this person might grow to be abusive. Either they die or they grow to be abusive. On a mundane level, when you send this person to the army, and let's say they have to disobey legal order, they won't have the clarity to see it, they won't have the self-confidence to do it, they won't have the backup to disobey legal order. And if they're considered a traitor when they disobey legal order, then the very masculine quality of Mars, that is assertion, this is the I am, this is not in alignment with the I am, and the Venus, the value, these are my values, are not aligned with my values. I, Mars, protect them. I disobey this illegal order. When we ravish that, we basically get fires. And then we have bad quality of the air, fires, and then we get fires with fires with lasers, fire through the air, burning metal with lasers, which is what happened in Maui. Not only in Maui, yes, but it's, and also in Nova Party, by some reports. We did not listen to our veterans. We thought that the junkie person on the street is the person who made bad choices in life, and that's why they're addicted. There's nothing they can do for them because they don't do anything for themselves. They don't want to get out of this situation. That junkie on the street was a war veteran from in Israel. We literally had a war veteran that was serving in the army in 1973. And he was in the street. He was trying to, even from his situation in the street, go to the police and tell them there's something's going to happen because he knew about this, and he was just dismissed. A few hours later, a Holocaust occurs. Now, we had signals. We had Yitzhak Sadian who was burning himself when he had PTSD, and he was basically not assisted in any way, shape, or form. Okay, and we had people who were combatant and were trying to talk about the issue of illegal orders or keeping water from citizens or stuff like that, from civilians, stuff like that. They were in disagreement. It was like, hey, we have to do illegal orders. We want to talk about it. We want to change that. And they were not listened to. So they said, we're going to try and raise funds from the outside. And of course, they were called anti-Semitics and traitors. And these are people who we weren't listening to. And then there were mass graves of people being burned alive. So when we understand that there is a process that precedes something, then the interference is to honor our children, to honor our women, to honor our mothers, to honor our men, to honor the people whose gender is not binary. These are all points of interferences, because the Agenda 2030 relies on the divide and conquer. It relies on people saying, well, we can't ask questions right now. Yes, there was something very strange. 12 hours, nobody came to help. There was a slaughter of ISIS. And people saying, worse, I'm not the person who's like ISIS. And not ISIS as the goddess. Okay. And then what they rely on is for people to be traumatized so much so they don't ask questions. They definitely do not disobey legal orders, and they just shock people and divide people. All the while, it's highly unlikely that the people who went with what they went with the Nova Party and the people who went what they went through in the Gaza Strip, not even by the bombings of the IDF, but by their own regimes, would have an interesting conversation. The forced hospitalization of people were the Nova Party. If you're too busy thinking that all the Israelis are Nazis that want to exterminate Palestinian people, no, the Palestinian people are employees at the villages in Israel's case, so unless there are some, depending on the region, okay? But when it came to, the slaughterhouse that was in southern Israel, most of these people were hiring Palestinian people. They were helping Palestinian people wherever they could, and they were pro-Palestinian people. Some people even say they were targeted because of that. Okay? But when you're not listening to, it's like, hey, those people at the Nova Party were later, the survivors were later forcefully hospitalized. Okay, now before this happened, it became okay to forcefully hospitalize a person because, hey, the family cannot deal with their crisis. So let's say this person went through violence, maybe even in the family. Or they don't have housing because there is a problem with corruption around land allocation. Mind you, the midheaven was conjuncting Danabalgiti when I started this episode. So before we lost land in praxis, there were people who were homeless and not being housed. Decades ago in Israel, the word homeless was a person who does not own a real estate property. Okay, if you did not own the house that you're living in, you would be considered homeless. Today, people hear about it and they laugh at it. Just nothing to laugh at. The people who made the French Revolution owned land. The people who don't own land, they make world wars. Their children are abducted and they grow into this terror, forced terror. If they go to fundamentalists, or people shock people so much so that they wish to die and see death as a blessing, all they have to do is engage it. They're looking for some meaning in their situation, and there you get a kamikaze. Jupiter, hour it is. and the descendant on the moon in Capricorn. But now we get another point of interference. We understand that for people to have a couple of acres each and houses that are spacious, it doesn't have to be a mansion, it's just a spacious house. Their relationships are better, their health is better. The most they'll make is a revolution. You don't have to worry about the world war. Before we lost land, we didn't house our homeless. If a man was living a broken marriage, he would sometimes have to live in the street because he would be forced to pay for his children, whether he did or did not, whether he got a welfare money, he was forced to pay for his children. Even if he didn't have money, he would sometimes be forced into the street. You say, oh, it's the responsibility to be a father and so on and so. Yes, but there is corruption. The reason that he couldn't support it had to do with corruption. It's being abused at work. If he doesn't get to be a child himself, he didn't have childhood. And so when a person is in the street and you make the street safe, make the street habitable, house the homeless. In Uganda, they live in mud houses and they have these trenched mud houses, and they keep the temperature better than a modern home, a modern cement home. So it doesn't have to be multi-expensive. Before we lost land, we didn't house our homeless. If a man wanted to peacefully leave the marriage, he would be forced into poverty because the work market is so corrupt that he couldn't make it. If a woman wanted to leave the marriage, she would be forced into poverty because there is corruption in the working market. She didn't have a place to stay. And so again, it's like when a person is such a situation from the street and the street is not safe, intentionally, then it's a lot easier to recruit this person. So you just have to deal soft drugs, okay, and then the person is being trafficked. Or you just have to help us with a couple of phone calls. It's not totally kosher, but you'll get money. And hey, it was not totally kosher that you're here in the street and not, seeing your children or buying them a trip around the world or doing something that you're supposed to have been doing for a living. Now you've got this person, and these couple of calls are about selling weapons and trafficking children. Okay? So either the person is dying or dead, but is dead with dignity and accessible. And so when we came to that, then we understand that before we got invaded, we had an inhabitable labor market, we had corruption, we had our homeless were not being housed regardless of their marital status, and even with the marital status. And then, when single people did not have housing, then people with families did not have housing, and people with families who lost someone did not have housing, even if they had children that did not have housing. And then there were settlements. So who are you going to put in the settlements? Well, everybody who wants to have a night out of the street. And then when the settlements are being bombed or terror happens there, if these people have a choice to where to come back to, they'll leave. So you keep them in this lack of choice. You reduce their choice expansion. Now when we get all of that, we understand that there were decades upon decades of decreasing housing, land, and space, all the while oppressing women and men thereby, and oppressing willing consent, so people also get raped and they get overpopulated. It's simply so. And you don't have a place to house these children, so it's easier to steal them and to trade them. When we understand that the mother who says, hey, I am child free, is not necessary, it's not a hating children Nazi. Hitler loved children. Some of them, he was torturing others. So the mother said, hey, I am child free. Okay, it is not about it. Well, why doesn't she have children? And then the mother who has had children, she's been told all her life, with the children comes the wealth. And then she's abandoned. And everybody looking at her, why did you choose to have children when you know you can't take care of them? But if she was child-free, it was, don't you think that's selfish that you don't bring a child to the world? I mean, come on, what does want to be up with your life? Now, if a woman is working, it's not just women, okay? If a man is not married, he's like, I'm not ready to be married. I have things I have to sort with my life. I don't even know if I can do marriage. Then he's a joker, then he's a player, then he is a jackass, is just an Arschloch, then even sometimes he's even a narcissist. He's, he's a scambag, he's no good. Okay, but if a man marries someone when he was not really ready for it, well, you should have known before before you dipped it, you should have known that there could be a baby that comes out. Or you should have known you're going to have to take care of this business. It's like a 22 catch that everybody is in. We don't allow people to be. If a person can just be, then they can't let others be. Then we have wars and conflicts. And there are people who benefit from that. If we understand that, then it's a point of interference. And when we tend to these points of interference, okay, today in Jerusalem, there was a group of people that already shot some people, and they had so much ammunition that they could blow up the entire Jerusalem city. It's a medium-large city. It's the capital city of Israel. All three religions. But people did tend to that, so they were stopped. Yes, there were people that were being injured. Yes, there was a shooting. No, they didn't blow up the entire Jerusalem. When we tended to it, we avoided it. It was planned. So is 2030. It is planned. Concentration camps marketed as 15-minute cities, planned. Okay, poison marketed as medicine, planned. And already planned, implemented. Social credit score, planned, implemented. That doesn't mean that there are no points of interference that we can tend to. And it doesn't mean that people who are hurt should be victim blamed. Nobody is to blame that they got slaughtered, that they got raped, that they got beheaded, that they got into a massacre. Nobody is to blame for that. They're not the lean Jew. Okay. And if we tend to be more inclusive, live in and let live, if we tend to these points of interference, if we just so much as listen to this episode and understand, then we are already reducing a lot of the damage effect. We're already tending, we're already inviting alternatives, we're already shifting the timelines. And there are going to be more and more things that are unraveling, and our readiness is going to become, we're going to become more ready as well to what we do want. Because the validation that we're not imagining, some people that were considered psychotic were simply having trauma, that they have less somatic experience. Okay, they don't feel so much in the body, which is not so accessible for people who haven't gone through this. Unfortunately, more and more people go through this now. And then they see things, they hear things, and it's difficult for them to interpret. Some of these things are actual things that are happening. Some of the things are future timelines, and those timelines can be shifted, those timelines can be changed. And that is important to understand, because before, people were being hospitalized for surviving Nova Party, okay, the slaughterhouse of the 7th of October. Before that, there were people, and still are people, forcibly hospitalized around the world. Now, if you want somebody to stop somebody from doing something, okay, then you have the ways to do that. The jailing system is also something to talk about, okay? Perhaps Norway has it a bit better than some other places. But if you, perhaps, okay, no, it's not the truth. But if a person goes through a certain crisis, then they need validation, they need autonomy, then they need the time to relax and the ability to do what they find is good for them, and the liberty to do so in conditions that are flexible. It's basically healing the labor market and the birthing experience, okay? And they see things, so it's not bad to engage with that so-called psychotic content, because some of these things might be very useful. Okay, but before, the people who managed to survive an atrocity were forcibly hospitalized so much that you can't speak to them. There were billions being forcibly hospitalized or being locked for being so-called crazy. And again, if you want to stop somebody from hurting people, there are means to do that. But to bombard them with chemical stuff is not the way to go about it. So, this is just one of these episodes, and now the Midheaven is on Neptune. It's us creating the world where the missing people, the kidnapped people can return to. And it is that which eventually is point of interference. And that's what it is. It's a point of interference that can assist in shifting timelines. There was supposed to be a bombing that blows the entire Jerusalem today. There was a terror attack. Nobody, as far as I know, right now, blew the entire Jerusalem today. It was supposed to. Astrology saw something going through the line of Jerusalem in particular with the Kazini, which is, we're not over the Kazini yet, okay? But as to today, it didn't happen. It was planned. It didn't happen, okay? So is 2030. So I hope this gives both validation to people who already began to experience those betrayal experiences, what's the meaning of all of this, as well as points of interferences and focus that we can implement, even if only in just tending to it in our thought and allowing processes and allowing solutions to come in or next steps to come in. So thank you for listening.